It started with a whisper no one else heard. Eliza had always been a light sleeper, the type who noticed every creak of the house, every shifting shadow under the door. But when the whisper came, low, rasping, and unmistakably real, she knew it hadn't come from inside her head. It was her first night alone in the farmhouse her great uncle had left her. She wasn't sentimental, but something about the inheritance called her in a way she couldn't explain. Nestled deep in a pine forest with no neighbors for miles, the house had stood untouched for years. Windows thick with grime, floorboards warped with time, and an uneasy silence that pressed against the walls. By midnight, the house had swallowed every trace of daylight. The old clock in the hallway hadn't worked in decades, yet it ticked, each sound too deliberate to be random. When Eliza finally settled into bed, she told herself the whisper was wind slipping through the old boards. But the second time it came, closer, more distinct, it shaped her name. Just that, nothing else. Not a threat, not a greeting, just the soft drag of her name across the darkness. She sat up, pulse climbing into her throat, eyes searching the black. Nothing moved, but something was there, not watching from the shadows, waiting inside them. The second night, the whisper returned, but now it moved, behind the walls, inside the pipes, beneath the floorboards. She began to sense it pacing, listening, learning the shape of her fear. Lights flickered when she passed. Doors that refused to budge in daylight now opened on their own after dark. And the air, once stale, carried the scent of wet earth and iron. She called a repairman, hoping to blame faulty wiring or rats in the walls. He showed up, glanced once at the foundation, and left without a word. He never sent a bill. She never heard from him again. Eliza discovered the journal on the third day, buried behind loose planks in the attic. The pages were torn, soaked in something dark that had long since dried. Most of it was gibberish, symbols and runes, odd descriptions of flesh without shape, and a mirror that doesn't reflect you. But one entry was clear. It warned of the house's hunger, not for people, but for presence. It fed on awareness. If you acknowledged it, it remembered you. If you listened to the whisper, it grew louder. The house was not haunted. It was alive. By the end of the first week, Eliza had stopped using mirrors. Something in them moved independently of her, smiling when she didn't. Her reflection blinked too late. She caught it mouthing things she hadn't said. She boarded up every glass surface in the house, wrapped the television in blankets, and turned every photo frame toward the wall. But even that didn't stop the whisper from finding her. Now inside her head, sometimes layered over her own thoughts, sometimes speaking memories she hadn't yet lived. One night, she blacked out. She woke standing at the foot of the stairs, barefoot and soaked in water she didn't remember stepping in. The cellar door stood open behind her. She hadn't even known the house had a cellar. It had never appeared before, not even on the blueprints. Inside was a staircase that spiraled impossibly deep, far deeper than the foundation should allow. She descended, led by a soft, glowing hum, like breath caught between dimensions. The walls grew moist. The deeper she went, the more the steps pulsed underfoot. She realized the stairs weren't made of stone. They were ribs. At the bottom, she found a room carved from flesh and bone, organic, beating. In the center stood a figure that looked like her, but wrong. Taller, thinner. Its eyes were pits of moving static, and it smiled with too many teeth. It didn't speak with words. It spoke with memory, showing her flashes of every night she thought she'd slept, every moment she thought she was alone. It showed her the times it had borrowed her skin, walked in her body, spoken with her voice. It showed her herself through the eyes of others, her neighbor screaming when she passed by, her reflection grinning in security footage, her own phone capturing her whispering into the dark when she thought she was silent. She fled the cellar, but it followed. Not the figure. No, it never left that place, but what it had planted inside her. She began forgetting hours at a time, finding objects in her hands she hadn't picked up, the fridge full of raw meat she never bought, deep claw marks on the inside of her bedroom door. She tried to leave the house, but the road stretched endlessly, looping her back to the front porch each time. Days lost meaning, nights grew longer, and always, the whisper never stopped. Eliza began to change. Her eyes turned darker, not just in color, but in depth, like looking into a well with no bottom. Her voice developed a second echo beneath it, faint, But there, when she opened her mouth to speak, sometimes someone else's voice answered. Her skin grew colder, not from the air, but from inside. The house didn't trap her. It merged with her. Every board creaked in time with her breath. Every door hinge groaned in sync with her heartbeat. She wasn't alone in the house. She was the house. One night, years or maybe only weeks later, a traveler broke down near the forest. He spotted the faint silhouette of the farmhouse and approached it, hoping for help. The porch light flickered on before he touched the steps. The door creaked open by itself. A soft, welcoming voice called out from inside. Come in. You look tired. He hesitated, but something about the voice soothed him. Familiar, warm. He stepped inside, and the door shut behind him. Eliza stood at the far end of the hallway, her smile perfectly human. Almost. Behind her, the shadows shifted unnaturally, rising like tendrils from beneath the floor. The traveler blinked, suddenly cold, and the house whispered his name. No one ever saw him again, and somewhere far beneath the boards, the heartbeat grew stronger. The house had fed, and Eliza slept, peacefully now, dreaming your name. They told her the old barn was cursed, but Emma didn't believe in curses. Not really. She believed in forgotten stories, in local legends twisted by time. She believed in the power of suggestion, in fear passed from one mouth to another until it grew teeth. So when she inherited her uncle's farmhouse and the sagging barn beside it, she moved in without hesitation. It was quiet land, surrounded by fields that rolled toward the horizon like waves, perfect for starting over. She left the city behind and embraced the silence. But the silence never stayed quiet for long. The first night, the hallway light outside her bedroom flickered. Once, then again. She thought nothing of it. Old wiring, probably. The house had stood since the 1940s. Her uncle had lived alone and hadn't cared much for upkeep. Still, it gave her a strange feeling, like someone had brushed her shoulder in the dark. The next day, she checked the bulb and found it loose in its socket. She screwed it in tightly and thought that was the end of it. But that night, the kitchen light blinked. Twice. She stood at the edge of the hallway, staring into the dark kitchen as the bulb pulsed softly like a dying star. Then it stopped. By the third night, every light in the house blinked at least once, some in sequence, others randomly. She began keeping count. 7 blinks in the living room, 2 in the bathroom, 13 in the hallway, and always at night. The daytime was peaceful, even beautiful. Birds called from the trees, wind rustled through tall grass, and the sun cast a warm glow over everything. But when night fell, the lights began to communicate in some language she didn't understand. She asked around town, casually at first. Did they know anything about the property? The barn? Her uncle? People grew quiet when she brought it up. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided her entirely. One elderly woman leaned in close and whispered, "He kept the lights on for a reason." Emma asked what that meant, but the woman only shook her head and said, "You'll see." Curiosity turned to unease. She avoided the barn entirely. It stood like a rotting carcass behind the house, its roof caved inward, while its doors sealed shut with rusted chains. Vines crept over its surface like veins. Her uncle had nailed boards across the windows, not haphazardly, but with precise care, almost ritualistic. She stared at it often from her window, wondering why he had gone to such lengths. One afternoon, she found a small switch panel near the back porch, tucked behind some overgrowth. When she flipped it, a series of floodlights mounted on the barn's exterior came to life, washing the old wood in harsh white light. That night, the lights in the house didn't blink at all. She slept soundly for the first time in days, but the next evening, just after the sun dipped below the horizon, the floodlights failed. One by one, they sputtered and died, bathing the barn in darkness once more. As if on cue, the hallway light blinked. She began researching. Old newspapers, library microfiche, anything she could find. There was very little about the property itself, but her uncle's name came up once in a dated article from 1986. He'd reported seeing lights in the field behind the barn. Strange patterns, flickering like Morse code. The article made light of it, suggesting stress or hallucination. But the notation at the end chilled her. Witness claims lights always blink when it's near. That phrase echoed in her mind. When it's near. What was it? She dreamed of blinking lights, of tall shadows moving between trees, of breath on her neck in the pitch black. One night she awoke to total darkness. The power was out. Not a single light in the house worked. Her phone's flashlight barely pierced the gloom. As she walked through the house, the silence pressed in around her, thick, suffocating. Then, outside, a single light blinked. In the field, a soft white pulse. She watched it from her window, heart pounding. It blinked once, then again, then it moved. The light bobbed through the grass like a lantern, weaving closer to the barn. It stopped near the chained door. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, all at once, every light in the house exploded in a burst of blinding white, and the world outside went black. The pressure in her ears grew unbearable. She collapsed, clutching her head, and for a moment she swore she heard something scratching at the walls. She awoke the next morning in the kitchen, sprawled across the floor. All the lights were intact. The power was back. Nothing seemed out of place. But the chains on the barn door lay broken, shattered links strewn across the dirt like shed skin. She should have left, packed her things and fled. But something had taken root inside her, a compulsion she couldn't shake. That evening, she stepped into the barn. Dust hung in the air like mist. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet. Old tools lined the walls, hooks, saws, rusted blades. In the center of the room stood a strange contraption, a tall metal frame with wires and bulbs arranged in a circle. She approached it slowly, recognizing it as some kind of light array, like a crude spotlight. Her uncle had built it. Notes littered the nearby workbench, scribbled diagrams, strange symbols, and page after page with only one sentence repeated, "The lights keep it away." She activated the array, and for a moment the barn lit up like noon. But the bulbs began to blink in rapid succession. 1, 2, 5, 7, 13 patterns, pulses, a language. She felt a weight behind her. Turning slowly, she saw it. A silhouette, impossibly tall, faceless, eyes like smoldering coals blinking in unison with the lights. Its limbs were too long, joints bending the wrong way. It stood just at the edge of the light's reach, as if afraid to step forward. The bulbs flickered faster. The creature hissed, a low, wet sound like boiling tar. And then it vanished. She staggered outside, heart pounding, lungs burning. That night she didn't sleep. She stayed in the barn, sitting beneath the light array, watching as the bulbs blinked through the long hours of darkness. She understood now. Her uncle hadn't gone mad. He had been holding something back. Over the following days, she reinforced the array. Added batteries, solar panels, backups upon backups. Every night, the lights blinked and the thing returned. Always just outside the circle. Always waiting. She studied its patterns, tried to learn its language. It never spoke, but its presence carried intent. Hunger. Then one night, the array didn't turn on. Every circuit was intact. Every bulb should have worked, but they didn't. The creature stepped into the barn. She ran, locked herself inside the house. All the lights began to blink, not in warning, but in greeting. It was inside now. She heard its limbs scraping along the ceiling, its breath whispering through vents. She tried to leave, but the doors wouldn't open. Every bulb in the house lit up at once, casting her shadow on every wall. And then they blinked. One by one, the lights extinguished. She was never found. The house was left empty. The barn sealed once more. Locals say the lights still blink sometimes, just before a storm or when the fog rolls in too thick. They say you can see a figure in the upper window of the farmhouse, pacing, watching, waiting. And if the lights blink more than 3 times in a row, you should never go inside, because the lights blink when it's near. It started with a box of old tapes. A friend of mine, Daniel, found them in his attic, dust-covered, stacked neatly in a metal case that smelled of mildew and time. He didn't remember putting them there. They were labeled in black marker with cryptic titles: Run, Don't Look, Missing. A dozen tapes, all marked with warnings rather than names. I shouldn't have agreed to watch them with him. I should have left them buried in the past where they belonged. The attic itself had been undisturbed for years, layered in dust, filled with forgotten things. But the tapes, those weren't forgotten. They were waiting. The air around them felt wrong, stale, thick with something unseen. As we carried the box downstairs, Daniel hesitated, his fingers tightening on the handle. "I don't remember putting these here," he muttered again, and something in his voice, some edge of unease, made my skin crawl. The first tape was shaky, filmed on an old camcorder. The footage was of a man, Daniel's brother Ethan, pacing in a dimly lit apartment, mumbling to himself. He kept glancing over his shoulder, flinching at shadows that weren't there. His breath was uneven, his hands twitching. "It sees me," he whispered. "It knows." The camera jolted suddenly, as if Ethan had dropped it, and the screen cut to static. When the image returned, he was standing in the same room, but something was different. The walls were wrong, stretched, distorted, like the angles didn't add up. Ethan turned toward the camera, his face slack, his mouth moving without sound. Then the screen cut to black. Daniel exhaled sharply. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. We both knew Ethan had disappeared years ago, vanished without a trace. But here he was, captured in flickering frames, unraveling in real time before our eyes. Daniel and I exchanged uneasy glances. His brother had disappeared years ago, leaving behind only questions. No clues, no farewells, just gone. We put in the next tape. The timestamp suggested it was filmed 2 days after the first. Ethan was outside in the woods. The sky was dark, the trees swaying though there was no wind. The camera zoomed in on a figure standing between the trees, a tall, thin shape, barely more than a silhouette. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there. Ethan's voice on the tape was barely a whisper. "I can't stop it. I close my eyes and it's closer. I run and it's waiting." The camera trembled as he turned, running through the underbrush, his breath ragged. The footage ended abruptly, replaced again by static. The next frame showed Ethan in his apartment once more, but he wasn't alone. A shape loomed in the background just outside the camera's focus. Something without features, without details, a presence that should not have been there. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but the air around it seemed to warp, distorting the film. Ethan was shaking, whispering something we couldn't hear, and then the tape stopped. Just like that. Cut off. Daniel rewound it, played it again, but the tape refused to go further. We looked at the next one. The timestamps were inconsistent now. Days missing, gaps between recordings. Whatever was happening, it was escalating. Each tape unraveled a deeper nightmare. Ethan was slipping. His voice grew more frantic, his movements more erratic. At times, he seemed unaware of the camera, as if caught in moments he never meant to record. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. The presence in the footage grew closer. It was never clear, never in focus, but its effect was undeniable. Lights flickered when it appeared. The screen glitched. The static whispered, a voice buried beneath the sound, saying things we could almost understand. One tape showed Ethan scrawling symbols on his walls over and over, spirals, twisting lines, shapes that made no sense. His hands were raw, fingernails cracked from carving the same marks into his desk, his floor, even his own arms. "It makes me remember," he muttered. "I don't want to remember." His eyes were wide, unfocused, staring past the camera, past the room, as if something was standing just beyond the frame. Another tape caught him in his sleep, or what should have been sleep. His body was stiff, his breathing too shallow. He lay in his bed, unmoving, but something about him was wrong. The way his fingers twitched, the way his mouth moved, whispering silent words. The camera shook violently, as if whatever held it was terrified. Then the screen cut to static. The audio remained, a slow, rhythmic sound, breathing, not Ethan's, something deeper, heavier. The deeper we went, the worse it got. One tape had no picture, only sound. Ethan's voice, distant, distorted. "It knows I'm watching. It's watching back." A click, a deep, slow breathing that was not his own. The sound of something shifting, too close, too real. A wet scrape like nails against wood. And then a whisper, "You're next." I stopped the tape. Daniel was pale, his hands clenched into fists. "This is a joke," he muttered. "He's messing with us." But his voice wavered. He didn't believe it. One tape was nearly unwatchable, the footage riddled with distortion. But we caught glimpses, Ethan standing in front of a mirror, his reflection delayed, the reflection moving when he didn't. A hand, not his, reaching toward the glass from the other side. The screen cut out. When it returned, Ethan was on the floor shaking, whispering something over and over. "Don't answer. Don't let it in." And then the final tape, the one labeled end. Ethan was outside in an open field. The camera was shaking in his hands, his breathing uneven. "I tried to stop it," he whispered. "I tried, but it never ends. It's waiting. Always waiting." He turned the camera toward the darkness beyond the field, and there it was, closer than ever, filling the frame, towering over everything. A shape that wasn't a man, that wasn't human, a thing that should not be. And then The footage ended. Daniel and I sat in silence. The room felt colder. The shadows seemed deeper. And then Daniel said the words that made my stomach drop. There was never a camera, he whispered. Ethan never had one. The lights flickered. The static returned. And in the dark corner of the room, something moved. It started at exactly 2:13 a.m. I know because I was awake, scrolling mindlessly, when the television turned on by itself. A blast of static filled the room, too loud, too sharp, making my teeth ache. I reached for the remote, fumbling in the dark, but the screen flickered before I could shut it off. The static parted like a curtain, revealing a broadcast that shouldn't have been there. The station identifier in the corner read Local 58. I had never seen it before. The first thing that came on was a weather alert. White text against a black screen. Urgent bulletin. Remain indoors. Do not look at the sky. The warning repeated twice, then the screen cut to grainy footage of an empty street. The streetlights buzzed weakly, casting halos in the dark, but there was nothing there. No cars, no people. Just the silence of a dead city. Then the camera lifted upward. For a second, there was only darkness. Then, something. A ripple, a shift, as if the sky itself were bending. The footage cut to static again, and my stomach clenched. The text returned, but this time it wasn't a warning. It was instructions. If you are reading this, do not interfere. It is too late. They are here. My pulse hammered. I switched channels, but every station was the same. The emergency broadcast, the black screen. Then footage of someone's living room dimly lit as if filmed by a hidden camera. A couch, a flickering lamp, an old TV set mirroring my own screen. And on that screen was another room, identical to the first, creating an endless recursion of empty spaces. Until, in the last frame, something moved. A shape emerged, blurry at first, then clearer. Tall, thin. Its limbs were too long, its head slightly tilted as if listening. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was watching. The screen cut to black. A new message. The signal is not yours. They have tuned in. Do not adjust your set. Do not leave your home. A beep. Then another. The emergency broadcast tone stretched unnaturally long, warping into something else. A voice buried beneath the noise, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I muted the TV, but the voice continued. The sound wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from inside the room. I turned around slowly. The window was open. I didn't remember opening it. Outside, the street was empty. But the sky, it wasn't right. The stars were moving, twisting, forming symbols I didn't recognize. The television clicked off. The room was silent except for my own breath, coming too fast, too shallow. Then, from the black screen, a reflection. Not mine. I ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys, don't remember the stairs, just the cold air as I burst onto the street. Every house was dark, no movement, no sound, as if the entire world had gone silent. Then a flicker. Every window, every screen, and every home, all at once, flashing the same message in unison. We see you. The sky pulsed. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, shaking the ground beneath my feet. I looked up, and for the first time, I understood why the warning had said not to. They weren't in the sky. The sky was them. I don't know how long I stood there, staring, unable to move. But then the screens changed again. A final message just for me. You are the last transmission. The broadcast ended, and the stars began to fall. The first time I heard the knocking beneath the floorboards, I thought it was the pipes. Or maybe rats. The house was old, inherited, barely maintained. Its bones sagged with time, and every night brought a new sound. But this was different. This knocking had rhythm, intent, like something was counting. I followed it, barefoot across cold wood, down the creaking stairs, past sagging wallpaper that peeled like shedding skin. The basement door was cracked open, just enough for the air to bleed up. A stale, earthy breath that didn't belong to anything alive. I stood there, holding my own breath, listening. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2, then 7. That night I dreamed of a boy with no face. He stood in the center of the basement, surrounded by rotting beams and black water that shimmered like oil. He pointed down, wordless. When I looked where he pointed, the floor split open like wet paper, and something vast began to rise. When I woke, my feet were dirty, my hands were scratched, and the basement door was wide open. I tried to blame sleepwalking, but that didn't explain the footprints, small ones, not mine. leading from the basement to the edge of my bed. I boarded up the door, sealed it with nails, salt, even prayers I barely remembered. The knocking stopped for a while. Then the floor began to breathe, subtle at first, a soft rise and fall beneath the carpet. I told myself it was the shifting of wood, the natural settling of a house too old to stand. But one night, as I sat still and listened, I realized the rhythm matched my own breath. When I held it in, so did the floor. When I exhaled, it sighed. It was sinking with me. That's when I began to hear whispers. Not loud, not clear, just on the edge of understanding, like a voice behind a door in a dream. They came from the vents, from the drains, from beneath the bed. Words like hollow, open, come, down. I started finding dirt in strange places, in my sink, in my shoes, on the pillow beside me. Once I coughed and something dry hit the mirror. It was a tooth, not mine, small and yellow with a crack down the center. I called a priest. He refused to step inside. Said the house felt wrong. Said my eyes looked vacant. I asked him what that meant. He only crossed himself and left. I tried to leave too. Packed a bag, booked a hotel. But when I opened the front door, I wasn't outside. I was in the basement, standing on the trapdoor. The boy was there, still faceless, but now he was smiling. Somehow I knew. I fell. Not through space, but through thought, through memory, through everything that made sense. And when I landed, I was still in my home, on the floor, with dirt in my mouth and the lights all off. There are things beneath the house now. I don't see them, but I hear them, crawling, dragging themselves along beams that should not support life. Some nights I hear something chewing, and once I swear I heard a voice say, "You are the door." I don't sleep anymore, because when I do, I dream of roots growing from my chest, pulling me down into the soil. I dream of nails through my hands and wood against my spine. I dream of the boy crawling up through my mouth, laughing with my voice. The knocking has returned, but it's not on the floor now. It's coming from inside the walls. I can no longer tell if it's night or day. The windows show only stillness. Lightless fog that doesn't move, doesn't shift, just sits against the glass like skin pressed to bone. I tried opening one once. The fog poured in like water, thick and warm, and whispered in my ears with a voice I swear belonged to my mother, long dead. I sealed every crack. But it didn't matter. The house no longer obeys the laws of architecture. Rooms shift when I blink. Doors open into closets that stretch for miles. One time, I stepped into the pantry and found myself back in the basement, standing over the trapdoor with dirt in my mouth. The boy isn't alone anymore. There are others now. Tall, with faces stretched like canvas over broken frames. They gather in corners, always in threes, heads cocked at odd angles, as if listening to a frequency that hurts to hear. When I speak, they flinch. When I scream, they smile. They don't come to harm me. Not directly. They only watch. And the longer they do, the more I feel the skin of this place closing around me like a wound, pulling me back down into something older than memory. I found a journal in the wall, bound in leather that smelled like rot, its pages handwritten in the same cramped scrawl I'd begun seeing in my dreams. The ink shifted when I read it, words writhing like worms. It told of the first one, the original breach, the mouth beneath the world. They called him many things. The eater, the sibling below, the architect of flesh. He didn't build the house. He became it. He lives through it. He reaches through its boards like fingers through a wound, finding those with gaps in their minds. He can only rise where memory is soft, where trauma lives like embers. That's why he found me. He didn't come from my blood. He came from my identity. Piece by piece, he takes memory, language, sensation. I forget the faces of my parents, the sound of my own voice, the name of the girl I once loved. I touch my skin, and it feels like paper soaked in rain. One night I found my own corpse in the bathtub, bloated, smiling, filled with soil. My hand still twitched. I didn't scream. I didn't react. I only reached out, touched its cheek, and whispered, "Finally." Then I turned away, knowing it wasn't the first. I've died here so many times. The floorboards whisper now constantly, like thousands of mouths just beneath the surface. If I lie still enough, I can make out full conversations, bargains, prayers, children asking for mothers that never came. Sometimes I hear myself down there, pleading, begging, promising anything to escape. But he doesn't want promises. He wants roots. The walls pulse when I cry. The pipes groan when I laugh. The stairs breathe with my heartbeat. I am being synchronized, assimilated, translated into something useful. Every emotion is absorbed. Every doubt becomes fuel. I tried leaving once, packed a bag, turned the knob, and walked out into the mist. I walked for what felt like hours, but the trees never moved. The grass never bent beneath my feet. When I turned around, I was standing at the threshold again. Only now the house was smiling, its windows curled upward, its gutters wept, and the boy was waiting on the porch, holding something in his hand. My face, a perfect mask of my skin, eyes still blinking, mouth twitching. He offered it to me. I took it. I wear it now sometimes when I forget who I am. I don't sleep anymore, not out of fear, but because he doesn't need me to. He watches through my eyes, speaks through my mouth. I catch myself whispering things in the middle of the night. Threats, confessions, instructions. I once wrote a letter to someone named Motherwood signed in blood. There is no Motherwood, but I mailed it anyway. The mailbox took it with a wet sound. I think I am being prepared for something. Not death, not madness. Birth. The pit beneath the house no longer hides. It has grown. The entire basement is now a mouth, ringed with teeth made of wood and bone, chanting low tones that vibrate through my spine. I kneel there often, not out of obedience, but compulsion. My body moves without me. The boy told me a secret last night. He came into my room, climbed into bed, pressed his forehead to mine, and whispered, "You're not the first, but you will be the last. When you finish becoming, the floor will open, and he will rise, wearing your name like skin." And I believed him, because when I looked down at my hands this morning, they were no longer mine. The knocking didn't stop. It came at every hour, sometimes soft, like fingernails brushing the grain of the door, sometimes loud enough to rattle the walls. I counted 7 knocks each time. Always 7. I don't know why. I think that's how many doors there are between here and where he comes from. Last night, the house began to sink. Not quickly, inch by inch, groaning, swallowing itself into the ground. I could feel it tilting slightly, just enough to make water flow the wrong way, just enough to make everything feel off. Gravity here has started to change. Down isn't what it used to be. I awoke this morning with dirt in my mouth and roots growing from my fingers. They twitch when I try to speak. I haven't used real words in days. I hum now, long, low sounds that echo through the hallways and make the mirrors sweat. The boy hums with me. So does the pit. The pit is no longer a place. It's a doorway, and it's open. When I look down, I no longer see earth. I see faces, thousands of them, pressed together in a twisting, pulsing wall of memory and suffering. They look up at me, not in agony, but in welcome. They mouth my name with reverence, though I no longer know what that name is. The face that rises from the pit isn't the boy's. It isn't mine. It's older than either, shaped like all the things we forget before we're born. It's made of places we never return to in dreams. Its eyes are black, but they move inside, showing images like static, train stations that don't exist, forests with no sky, faces melting in candlelight. He speaks without a voice, and I hear him anyway. Step in. I do. The teeth close behind me, but they don't fight. They seal. I am no longer separate. I am the floor. I am the bones beneath it. I am the mouth that opens in the dark. I am the thing people hear when they sit too long in silence and begin to feel watched. I walk through corridors that should not exist, rooms made of things that should not feel, a hallway lined with clocks, each ticking in reverse, a chamber with a single chair where someone sits that looks like me, bound in ropes made of hair, blinking once every minute. I sit across from him for what could be days. We do not speak. We do not move. We only exist in mirrored agony. And then I rise and he stays. I leave myself behind. I walk on. The house folds. It bends inward like paper burning from the edges, and what remains is him. Towering, beautiful in his wrongness, smiling with a mouth that stretches to the horizon. And in his hand, the world. It looks small, delicate, ready. He places it gently on the floor. A new floor. And as I kneel beside it, I realize I am no longer part of the story. I am the story. I am the house that waits on the hill. I am the fog that lingers by the porch. I am the knocking that comes when no one's home. I am the floor that opens when you sleep too deeply. I am the child that whispers, he's coming through. And when they move in, whoever they are, wherever this place ends up, I will smile through the wood grain, stretch beneath the floorboards, and press my new face against the inside of their walls, because he came through me. and now he'll come through you. The town had long since forgotten the house that stood at the edge of the woods. It was a place no one dared speak of, a shadow that clung to the history of the town like a scar. Generations had passed, and the house, weathered and ancient, continued to loom over the land. Its stone walls, now covered in creeping ivy, were cracked, and its windows were black voids that seemed to stare at the world with an insatiable hunger. No one knew who had lived there, or perhaps more accurately, no one who had dared venture close had ever returned to tell the tale. The house was a legend in itself, whispered about in the darkest corners of the tavern, spoken of only when the wind howled through the streets. It was said to drink blood, to consume the very life force of those who ventured too close. But for Emma, the legends only fueled her curiosity. She had heard the stories all her life, heard the warnings given to children who strayed too far from home, but something inside her yearned to know more. The truth called to her louder than the warnings, louder than her fear. Emma stood in front of the house as dusk fell, her heart pounding in her chest, a cold breeze tugging at her jacket. She had read about the house, heard every version of the story, but none of them truly explained the pull she felt, the way the house seemed to whisper her name. It was as though the house itself knew she was coming, waiting for her. She had come alone. Many before her had attempted to discover its secrets, only to disappear without a trace. She felt that same trepidation settle into her bones, but her resolve was firm. She wasn't like the others. She would uncover the truth whether the house wanted her to or not. The gate creaked as she pushed it open, the rusted iron groaning in protest. The cold, stale air wrapped around her, and the scent of decay filled her nose. It was as if the house itself was exhaling, a living creature with an insatiable breath, pulling her into its grasp. She stepped cautiously onto the property, the ground beneath her feet uneven, covered with thick moss that seemed to swallow her every step. She didn't look back. There was no turning back now. With each step, the house seemed to grow larger, its looming presence engulfing her, until she stood before the door. It was slightly ajar, as if waiting for her to cross its threshold, to step into the unknown. The house felt alive, alive and hungry. The moment Emma crossed the threshold, the air inside the house grew colder, heavier, as if she had stepped into another world entirely. The door creaked shut behind her, sealing her fate, trapping her inside. The scent of mildew and old wood flooded her senses, and the silence was deafening. There was no sound of the wind, no hum of the outside world, only the oppressive quiet that clung to the walls, as though the house itself had swallowed every sound over the years. She couldn't see much in the dim light filtering through the dust-covered windows, but her eyes quickly adjusted to the gloom. She noticed the walls were lined with old, faded portraits of people she didn't recognize. Their eyes seemed to follow her, cold and lifeless. As she took a step deeper into the house, she felt the strange, inexplicable sensation that she wasn't alone, that something was watching her, something ancient and sinister. The house seemed to breathe around her, each creak and groan of the floorboards like the sound of a living creature shifting in its slumber. Emma paused, her breath shallow, unsure whether it was the house itself making these sounds or something else, something worse. But she pressed forward, drawn by the need to understand, to uncover what had brought this place to life in the first place. What secret did it keep buried beneath its decaying walls? Up ahead, she noticed a staircase leading to the second floor. It seemed almost inviting, though Emma couldn't explain why. She felt an intense compulsion to climb it, to move deeper into the heart of the house. The stairs were made of old wood, groaning under her weight with every step, the sound echoing through the empty halls like a warning. The house seemed to respond to her movement, the whisper starting, faint at first, almost imperceptible, like the rustling of wind through dead leaves. But as she ascended, the whispers grew louder, more urgent, a cacophony of voices she couldn't understand. Her heart hammered in her chest as the sound seemed to grow closer, as though the voices were circling her, suffocating her. Emma's steps faltered as she reached the top of the stairs, the air growing thicker, heavier with every breath. Her feet were leaden, as if the house itself were trying to pull her back, to keep her trapped in its grasp. And then from the darkness ahead, a cold, hollow laugh echoed, sending a jolt of terror through her body. She froze, her breath catching in her throat, but the laughter was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving only the silence in its wake. Emma's skin crawled as she tried to make sense of what she had heard, but there was no time for answers. Something was waiting for her. She could feel it, lurking in the shadows, its presence just beyond her sight. She pushed the door open slowly, the faintest creak signaling her entry into the next room. The air was thick with dust, the room heavy with the weight of forgotten years. She could see the outline of old furniture, shrouded in sheets, the remnants of a past long lost to time. But in the far corner of the room, something was different. The air seemed colder there, and the shadows seemed deeper, as though they were waiting, watching her every move. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on a dark shape in the corner. It was a figure, hunched and twisted, its features hidden in the darkness. Emma's breath hitched, and her body tensed, but she couldn't look away. It was as if the figure was calling to her, its presence pulling her toward it. As she stepped closer, the figure remained still, its form barely visible in the dim light. But the closer she got, the more she felt the weight of its gaze, its eyes, burning with an unnatural hunger, locked onto her. The air around her grew thick with the scent of iron, a sharp, metallic tang that made her stomach turn. She didn't want to look, didn't want to get any closer, but her feet betrayed her. She was drawn in, as if the figure were a magnet, and she was the iron. And then, just as she was within arm's reach, the figure suddenly moved, its face twisting into a grotesque, gaping maw of blood and teeth. The room exploded with an overwhelming sense of terror, and Emma stumbled back, her heart racing as the house seemed to shift around her, as if alive, hungry for her fear. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in the dark. She turned, her eyes wide with panic, but the room was no longer as she had seen it. The furniture was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of black. There was no light, no escape, just an infinite darkness that seemed to press in on all sides. The whispers grew louder, now a chorus of agonized screams, each one more frantic, more desperate than the last. And through it all, the figure in the corner remained, its eyes glowing red, its hunger palpable. It stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, as though savoring every moment, every drop of fear that poured from her. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled backward, but her feet caught on something, sending her crashing to the ground. As she struggled to rise, she felt the ground beneath her give way, like the house was shifting, moving beneath her, swallowing her whole. And then, just as she thought she would be consumed, the figure lunged, its cold, bony hand reaching out to claim her. The darkness closed in, and Emma screamed, but no sound escaped her lips.